Shabbat Shalom. It's not every day that a Jewish kid gets to sit at the right hand of the Holy Father. But yesterday was my once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do so. Together with Cantor Schwartz, who offered an incredibly powerful El Maleh memorial prayer, we were both humbled and honored to represent the Jewish community at the multi-religious gathering with Pope Francis at the 9/11 memorial. It was an event, in the words of one of my children, that was even bigger than my bar mitzvah, and a wonderful way to cap off what was an otherwise quiet week on the Jewish calendar. There are so many parts of the day that I'll never forget and want to share with you this morning. It was an experience like no other to meet the Pope, with whom I exchanged warm greetings of peace and fellowship on behalf of our entire community. He exuded a gentle warmth and kindness, and despite his whirlwind schedule, struck me as totally in the moment for the historic gathering. For those of us assembled on that hallowed ground where the Twin Towers once stood, the iconic value of the event was extraordinary. This Pope, we know, understands the power of an image, a cross-section of faith leaders assembled in harmony at the very site where religion had been leveraged towards acts of horrific violence, was a statement to all present, and I hope to the entire world. Every clergyman shares a pastoral calling to provide comfort to those in need or in pain, and it's my hope that the event succeeded in that sacred gesture. For me personally, two of the most moving exchanges appeared off camera. First, a quiet conversation I shared with the wife of one of the airline pilots on 9/11, as she told me of her commitments to honor her late husband's memory. Then, as we were leaving the event, my family bumped into a synagogue congregant who had lost family that fateful day in the North Tower. I listened intently as he graciously and age-appropriately answered the questions of my children who hadn't been born in 2001, on what it was like to lose a sibling that day, and how much it meant to him to honor the memory of his brother. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to block off a day to visit the 9/11 memorial. It was a reminder to me that both as New Yorkers and as a nation, we remain and must remain fully committed to remembering those who perished on 9/11, grapple with the permanent scar that day has on our collective psyche, and communicate that commitment and struggle to our children. There are so many things I will and will always want to remember. There was the memorial prayer offered by Cantor Schwartz. Sublime as we know his voice to be, you can only imagine what it felt like to be there and hear the voices of others join in as he concluded with a warm rendition of Oseh Shalom. There was also the bro hug shared between me and my new colleague, Imam Khalid Latif, just before the shared invocation. And I'm so very excited to build on those relationships ahead. There was the green room in which all of us sat. So many faith traditions linked together by a common search for an iPhone charger and a Wi-Fi password. There was the text message that my urologist brother sent to my whole family that read, "See that rabbi standing there next to the Pope? His brother, he's a doctor." And then, of course, my mother in Los Angeles, who in the past 24 hours has spoken to everyone, from the kosher butcher to her hairdresser to the attendant at the dry cleaners, about her son and the Pope. For a glorious and fleeting moment, all my failings as a son have given way to a tsunami of kvelling that I hope will last, please God, at least through the end of the weekend. More than my own experiences, the Pope's visit to New York bears the potential to be a springboard to a much larger conversation. While I fully admit that I'm still somewhat starstruck at the experience, I'm unabashed in my belief, and I've spoken about this before, that Pope Francis is perhaps the most exciting religious leader of our time. A pope whose model of religious leadership is relevant not just to the Catholic community, not just for interfaith relations, but for every faith leader to consider as a model for his or her own work. So before the buzz of his visit subsides, I want to use this window to reflect on the message of his visit thus far and what the enduring lessons of his papacy may be for all of us here today, and most importantly, tomorrow and the day after. First and foremost, in a relatively brief amount of time, Pope Francis has instituted a dramatic change in the tone and temperature of the Church. What's interesting is, to the best of my knowledge, there have been no doctrinal changes, but a refreshing new face the Church has put on to the rest of the world. It was not so long ago, you may recall, at least from an outsider status, that the Church appeared to be driven by prohibitions regarding abortion or homosexuality, not to mention internal scandals. Just think about how far the Church has traveled from Pope Benedict's warnings regarding the dictatorship of relativism and Pope Francis, who, when asked regarding his views on gay priests, responded, "Who am I to judge?" Any religious leader knows that style is substance, and the Catholic Church is no longer leading with its chin. To the great credit of Pope Francis, he shifted the conversation away from who is out to who is in. Not what behaviors will preclude you from the services of the Church, but how the services of the Church must be better equipped to serve those at the periphery of society. It's not hard at all, to think of pockets of Jewish religious leadership who would do well to adopt Pope Francis's posture. We would all do well to remember that the divine pronouncements of today's Torah reading, even those with a sting to them, are described as having been delivered as due. I, for one, do not believe that respecting tradition and a demeanor of menschlichkeit, of welcoming, are mutually exclusive propositions. Certainly in terms of our own community here, I hope that it's this posture of inclusion, not exclusion, that guides all our efforts. I encourage you to read Pope Francis's words before Congress, the UN, and at the 9/11 gathering, because aside from this change of tone, what I find most refreshing about Pope Francis is the inability of the media or political establishment to fit him into any ideological box. He preaches on family and environmentalism. He speaks to an ethic of personal responsibility and social welfare. He's tough on abortion and same-sex marriage, but he's also unflinching on immigration. The Pope isn't really a conservative or a liberal. His leanings don't fit tidily into a chart, and I think that is absolutely terrific. The point is not whether you disagree or agree with him. Rather, the appeal of this Pope is it's a powerful counter-argument to the polarized debates of our time. His model suggests that ideological consistency has nothing to do with political affiliation, but with a litmus test of much higher integrity than mere party loyalty. One of the many ills afflicting us this political season is the fact that a candidate for office cannot be, for instance, a social liberal and a fiscal conservative, or the other way around. We don't permit subtlety or complexity in our leaders, and because maybe this Pope isn't running for office, he can. And I think this is an important lesson for all religious leaders. God isn't a conservative or a liberal, Republican or Democrat, hawk or dove. This Pope gets it, and it's a model well worth considering. Although it's somewhat premature to do so, There is, I believe, a thread that connects Pope Francis's call for environmental stewardship, for theological humility, for global responsibility, for economic justice, and otherwise. In each case, it's the abiding belief that every single human being is created in the equal and infinite dignity of God, and that demands that we care for this world and for each other. Theologically, no matter what our differences may be, in insisting on a rigid uniformity of belief, we diminish the dignity of another person's right to their beliefs. As stewards to God's creation, we are obligated to care for our common home in a manner that speaks not only to our present needs, but to the unborn generations yet to come. So too, in our attention to the plight of the poor and the refugee, our obligations are not founded merely on the golden rule of do unto others, but also on an awareness, as Pope Francis said to Congress, that we are a nation of immigrants, and therefore we must be attentive to the humanitarian crisis presently engulfing Europe. All of which, of course, is an argument that the Jewish community knows quite well. Our awareness that we were once strangers in a strange land, and therefore it calls on us to be attentive to the condition of the strangers in our own midst and our own era. As a Jewish community, the contours of Pope Francis's vision are well worth studying and to find points of common cause and collaboration. We may agree or disagree with the stands Pope Francis has taken, but the very fact that he has insisted on speaking to the issues of the day is a lesson for us all. His words and actions remind us that the point of religion is not descriptive to describe the world as it is. Rather, it's prescriptive to describe the world as it ought to be. In his insistence that faith be an instrument of peace, not violence. In his insistence that the church be a field hospital after battle, healing wounds and warming hearts. In his insistence that religion speak forcefully to the issues of the hour, Pope Francis has given all people of faith a model to which we can aspire and emulate. And most of all, he's done so with an abiding and deep sense of humility. His demeanor, and we were sitting with him yesterday, is not overbearing. Whatever his rank may be, there's a humanity to the man, a humanity that strikes me as being deeply concerned with the condition not just of every human being, but of a common humanity. And that, my friends, is something we can all take to heart. My warmest memory of all from yesterday relates not directly to the Pope, but to my dear friend and colleague, Cardinal Dolan, to whom the city of New York owes a great debt of gratitude for his inspired leadership. The formal part of the program was over, and as participants were greeting each other, the Pope stood for a few pictures with assorted dignitaries. Off to the side, Cardinal Dolan and I greeted each other warmly, and he said, "Elliot, aren't your children here?" To which I signaled to him where they were sitting, at which point Dolan said, "Well, bring them up here. They should meet the Pope." And I turned around and I caught the eye of my children and I waved them over, and to make a long story short, was able to give them each the gift of a handshake and a smile from the Pope, which I hope they will never forget. And it's this story, more than any other, that I've returned to in the hours since the event concluded. That in a split second of a chaotic recessional, Cardinal Dolan saw me and didn't see a rabbi or even necessarily even a Jew, but he saw a friend and a dad who probably wanted what every dad wants, to make his children happy. It was a supreme gesture of menschlichkeit, and it speaks volumes of Cardinal Dolan and the church he represents. If each one of us had within us the ability to recognize each other, not for our titles, our stature, or our faith, but for the human beings we are, and then performed acts of friendship and kindness, validating that common humanity. Well, now just think, how much better this world would be. I'm deeply grateful to Cardinal Dolan for many things, but it's that gesture as much as anything, exemplifying the gift of his ministry, that is worthy of emulation. May each and every one of us similarly seek, with unfailing humility, to do so in our own lives, and may the spirit of Pope Francis's visit continue to inspire our great city for many years to come. Shabbat Shalom.